Pangolin, Mogwai Gonfa, Katpulu, Relay, Waganag, Astaten, Calimari, Skippy Dibby Dib, Yo Dab Dub Dub. I call on the name of Poe, the Shadow Cat, and the Ghost of Grey, as I complete this circle accursed to. Oh, hello there. You startled me. You may recognise me as Mr. Giles from that occult TV show in the 90s, but I actually know nothing about all that sort of thing. Oh, this. I was just filling out my tax return. Well, you can't be part of a multiple award-winning series without becoming a little curious in the dark and mysterious, can you? So, without further ado, let's journey into the belly of the beast. What's the deal with Silent Hill? Is it Red Pyramid Thing or Pyramid Head? Does anyone ever leave Silent Hill alive? These questions and more answered in today's video.
Disclaimer, these questions and more may not actually be answered in today's video.
Hello, and welcome to the Poisonpaintfactory. My factory designated name is Poison226. Nice to meet you. Today, I want to talk about Silent Hill, and, more specifically, the monster Pyramid Head. They look like monsters to you. You see it too. For me, it's always like this. In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. Before we get too much further, how do you think Pyramid Head connects with the Caped Crusader, Moon Knight? Answers in the comments. Disclaimer. A lot of the information presented in this video is public information that I researched alongside my interpretation and opinions. Sources will be linked in the description, and yes, there will be spoilers. So, with all that said, let's get to it. Who or what is Pyramid Head? Pyramid Head looks like this. What? He has a pyramid for a head. I'm not sure what else you were expecting. Okay, so he does have visual variation across different art styles and media presentations, but the core of his iconic look never changes. A head shaped like a pyramid, even if the pyramid itself has variation, but we'll get into that. He carries a great knife, well, most of the time, or a great spear if not. He wears a filthy, tattered cloth that looks like a butcher's apron made of flesh. He's covered in rust and blood, but despite his monstrous and gross appearance, he's humanoid in shape, which could make you wonder. Red Pyramid Thing, more commonly known by fans as Pyramid Head, debuted in the Silent Hill 2 video game, and was designed by Masuhiroito. He's very visually masculine in stature, which at the time of Silent Hill 2's release was kind of unique. With the exception of the puppet doctor from the first game, which is more like a parasite infecting a human host, most of the actual monsters in Silent Hill were truly monstrous in design, or more feminine in stature, like the nurses. Silent Hill monsters are very symbolic in design, and Pyramid Head is absolutely no exception. His imposing figure is seen as judge, jury, and executioner, as he embodies a person's desire to be punished for their transgressions. Pyramid Head is visually striking and becomes very iconic within the franchise. Against the original designer's wishes, as well as a good chunk of the fanbase, Pyramid Head was later used outside of Silent Hill 2's story. We'll go over Pyramid Head's main appearance shortly, but first, let's briefly explain what Silent Hill is. Silent Hill was developed by Konami's Team Silent for the original PlayStation in 1999, a team that was originally the leftovers from other teams at Konami who just banded together to make something, anything. That something and that anything was obviously the first Silent Hill. What's the big deal with Silent Hill then? Well, it's a psychological horror survival game that was much more focused on symbolism, puzzle solving and self-reflection compared to, let's say, other survival horror games from that era. Gunning down zombies or dinosaurs, or even running away from a particularly persistent antagonist. No, not that particularly persistent antagonist, but if you are interested in hearing more about him, check out my video discussing Nemesis. Players must control the main protagonist and navigate through the eerie deserted town of Silent Hill while trying to resolve their character's personal trauma and defeat their innermost demons, often having to come to terms with horrific truths along the way. Each game focuses on a different main character who's on a different personal journey, with each story as bone-chillingly brutal as the last. But the real star of Silent Hill is, well, Silent Hill. The town itself steals the show every single time. Due to the limitations of the console hardware back in 1999, Silent Hill's aesthetic was drenched in fog as a way to combat the limited draw distances. A visual choice that ended up so striking and downright creepy, it stayed with the franchise long after the draw distance issues had been resolved. Silent Hill has two sides, well, technically three if you include the standard no spooky nonsense version, but after that there's the foggy, almost abandoned ghost version of the town, and the Otherworld. The Otherworld is a bit like a hellscape soaked in blood and rust, but it's also a bit of an abstract concept that hasn't been given a clear definition of whether it is actually another world or plane of existence, or just something in the minds of those trapped. Think Hellraiser meets The Cube. Everywhere there is darkness and death and pain, and you are perpetually navigating a town that you can't seem to leave. This is where the monsters are the most numerous and dangerous. The normal by comparison, foggy side of Silent Hill is dripping with spooky atmosphere. It's desolate, eerie, abandoned, condemned. Creatures and shadows move through the fog. They may be less numerous and typically more docile, but wait, can you hear that? The radios cackle and crackle. Is there something just out of sight, waiting? The first game, along with Silent Hill Origins, explores some of the origins of the town of Silent Hill, albeit with some contradictions to each other. So I won't go into details here, but needless to say that no matter when you visit, both versions of Silent Hill are deadly to all those who enter. Hellish creatures spawned from the most wicked of minds roam free and will stop at nothing to cause death and destruction. In Silent Hill 2, James Sunderland receives a letter from his wife. He is compelled to go to Silent Hill to meet her, but is faced with his own mortality and waking nightmare, as the creatures of the Otherworld force him to face his guilt. What's he guilty of? Well, I honestly would love to go into depth about James and everything. He is fascinating. But with the remake coming out soon, I personally don't want to spoil this for you, and I would implore you to check it out firsthand. Pyramid Head first appears in Woodside Apartments as an ominous watcher bathed in an eerie red light. Fortunately, he is on the other side of the bars, but not for long. James comes across a triangular magistrate later inside one of the apartments, attacking two mannequin monsters. James hides at first, but his fear response takes over and he tries to shoot the monster. Fortunately for James, the red pyramid thing doesn't seem too bothered and leaves. The first boss encounter happens as James tries to leave the Blue Creek apartment block. James must now face his literal demon in a battle that ends when an air raid siren calls. Pyramid Head loses interest in James and descends the waterlogged stairway, disappearing into the liquid abyss. We don't see Pyramid Head again until the hospital, when just his intimidating presence causes James to fall from the roof. Later, when escaping with Maria, Pyramid Head chases them down a twisted series of corridors. James makes it to an elevator, but Maria is not so lucky and is killed by Pyramid Head.
Prepare for trouble.
Make it double.
Oh, that's right.
Our final encounter with the judge, jury and executioner is in the hotel when not one, not two, two, now wielding spears, have Maria caged. Was that? Maria died earlier? Well, yes and no. If you want the full story, play the game. It's so good I'd plug it twice in the same video, and I'm not even being paid to say this. Please, Konami, call me back, please. So we get our final boss fight with Pyramid Head. Although he is not the final boss of the game, just saying. James must now hold his own against the two Pyramid Heads. Pyramid Heights? Big dudes with Dorito hats. Who, after the battle is won, concede James's victory and skewer themselves on their own spears. Yes, they are so powerful, only they can kill themselves. So that was Pyramid Head's first outing. But what does he symbolise? What is his purpose? Well, trying to be somewhat spoiler-free, Pyramid Head is a conjuring of James's mind to punish him and make him face and accept his guilt. The visual of Pyramid Head could have been influenced by a painting James once saw when he was in Silent Hill prior to all this, the good, relatively safe version of the town. To James, Pyramid Head serves as a judge, jury and executioner. His look, mannerisms and appearance are all shaped to guide James, not only through the town and plot, but emotionally towards the goal of acceptance. Okay, cool, but why are there two Pyramid Heads at the end of the game? Well, I guess I can't help but spoil the game's narrative a little here. If you really don't know and don't want to know, then skip to here. Okay, ready for spoilers? You've been warned. 3, 2, 1. James killed his wife Mary, and of course it is that guilt that he must face and accept. Pyramid Head as an entity likely represents that act of murder. By the time we get to the end of the game and have to fight Pyramid Head, James has killed again. Therefore, he has gained a new Pyramid Head, a new judge for his crime. But that's just a theory. A game theory. Despite being made as a specific monster to torment James, Pyramid Head would return for Silent Hill Homecoming, where he would be referred to as the Bogeyman. The main protagonist for Homecoming is Alexshepherd, who returns home. A homecoming, you could say.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
After recovering from war injuries, to find his father and younger brother missing, and his mother practically catatonic. If we take what we know from Silent Hill 2, we can assume the Bogeyman is here, because Alex has an inner desire to be judged and punished for what he's done. But what did he do? Killing people whilst in the army might seem like the logical conclusion, but spoiler alert, Alex was never in the army. Our first exposure to this version of Pyramid Head, who I will call Bogeyman from now on because that's how he's credited in the game, is during the opening scene. Alex is being wheeled through a dodgy looking hospital, and once he is left alone, we hear the iconic scraping sound of the great knife. There is a scream, and it seems the Bogeyman fancies himself a heart surgeon as the dodgy doc is skewered, although we don't get to see who did it. As if the big knife wasn't a dead giveaway. As we conclude the introductory nightmare sequence, Alex tries to leave in an elevator. Bad idea. Has he never watched a horror movie? Don't get in the elevator. As he waits, we hear the distinct scraping again, getting louder and louder until... The Bogeyman doesn't actually show himself until later in the game, when Alex is in the Grand Hotel. An eerie red light glows at the end of the hallway. Bugs begin scuttling across the floor, and then, dragging his great knife, Bogeyman comes into view. It's somewhat reminiscent of his original introduction in Silent Hill 2. He looks you dead in the eye and yet doesn't seem all that interested in you. It feels pretty tense, like looking down the jaws of a great white shark. Will this be our boss battle? No, Bogeyman just turns and leaves. He's had some subtle alterations since his last outing. His helmet is pointier at the front, rather than the squared off look from Silent Hill 2, and his knife has a toothed, aggressive quality to it. To be fair, I think they did a great job with the redesign. In my opinion, he looks pretty badass. We don't see Bogeyman again until near the end. Alex finds his dad tied up behind the church organ. As they discuss spoiler-related things, Alex's dad asks for forgiveness. Before Alex can really answer either way, Bogeyman appears and kills his father, gruesomely cutting him in two. And that's it. There are puzzles in Alex's otherworld version of Home, one which shows an army medal in the shape of a pyramid head, and one with a knife labelled Bogeyman knife. And in one of the alternate endings, we see two bogeymen encasing Alex's head with his own pyramid crown. It looks almost like an Iron Maiden that only encapsulates one's head. This turns Alex into a third new bogeyman. There are several theories about the Bogeyman's role in this game and what he truly represents. For what it's worth, I believe Bogeyman may not actually be Alex's tormentor, but actually his father's demon. Yes, Alex does have guilt over, spoiler warning for a game released in 2008, killed his brother and doomed the residents of Shepherd's Glen, and perhaps his guilt manifests as anger towards his father. Alex may believe the true guilt lies with him, and maybe he somehow summons Bogeyman to punish his father for him. But it's obvious his father feels guilt too. So the Bogeyman being there to punish him makes as much sense to me as it does being there for Alex. Plus, only Alex's dad was actually in the army, so the Pyramid Head medal and the Bogeyman knife in his secret cellar room seem to tie the monster more personally to him than his son Alex. Since the Bogeyman doesn't fight Alex like with Pyramid Head and James, and he doesn't appear very often at all to drive the plot or push Alex onwards, that's why I think he's his father's demon. The Bogeyman ending? Well, some say that it's Alex's guilt towards both his parents manifesting as some kind of atonement, turning Alex into the same monster he viewed his parents as. But you're welcome to share your thoughts below if you've come to a different conclusion. I'm not a professor of Pyramid Head after all. Outside of these mainline games, Pyramid Head was also used in the spin-off games Silent Hill Arcade and Book of Memories. He also has a cameo in the joke ending of Downpour and is potentially referenced in Origins with a picture. The main monster of that game, the Butcher, incidentally looks spookily similar to our triangular-headed executioner. And rumour has it, Origins was actually going to be the story of Pyramid Head's origin, but was later scrapped. Although the original Pyramid Head was a specific creation of James's mind as a way of self-judgment, through his repeated use, it can also be concluded that Pyramid Head is simply a recurring creature of Silent Hill who appears before any who desire punishment. Fans are hugely divided over Pyramid Head's use outside of Silent Hill 2, and when questioned about it, Tom Hewlett from Konami Digital Entertainment said, if he were to appear in a later game, it would need to be an appearance that tied centrally to the game's plot, like in Silent Hill 2, rather than a cameo. PH is an awesome, recognisable character, but that doesn't mean he should be trotted out in predictable ways. That's a surefire way to ruin his impact and lose what makes him great. On the same issue, Jason Allen from the Double Helix development team, who made Homecoming, said, I know his appearance has caused some consternation with the fans, saying he's James's demon and should not appear in any other version. As with everything else we do in the game, his presence, or lack of, has a very real purpose. We do not stick characters in the game simply because they look cool. Any creature you find will have a very real purpose and meaning supported by discoverable evidence. From our perspective, his presence is integral to the Silent Hill lore, and he performs a specific function that is neither arbitrary nor trite. So I hope that settles the debate once and for all. What do you mean, no? Well, I've dived about as deep as I'm willing to go. The sirens have changed our calling, and my time is running out. What I will say is there are 1,000,001 fan theories out there, and to me, that's what makes Silent Hill such a compelling series. There are breadcrumbs in the games for you to discover, but that doesn't mean what you concluded is what the director intended. Me? I'm just here to comment on the actual appearances of Pyramid Head, or Pyramid Head-shaped things within Silent Hill. Regardless of all the arguments for and against his inclusion in certain games, we do know for sure that the use of Pyramid Head outside of Silent Hill 2 goes against the wishes of the original creator, Masuhiroito. Not only was he unhappy at the character's use in other games, pachinko machines, and comic books, he also didn't like Pyramid Head's portrayal in the movies. Sorry, I just remembered, I was doing something when you distracted me. Calamari! As I complete this circle, a curse to...
Hey 226, what you doing?
No! Ray, you ruined it! Look, you made me summon Silent Hill Revelations again! Okay, while we're here, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Silent Hill was released in 2006 and directed by Christophegans. Very loosely based on the original game, this film follows Rose trying to find her daughter in Silent Hill. Pyramid Head features as one of the monsters, and he was played by Roberto Campanella. Pyramid Head first appears in the movie at Midwich School, when Rose is trying to escape the darkness. After she sees what looks like her daughter scribbling away feverishly at a desk, Rose falls through a mesh wall, landing hard on the ground below. As she comes to, the man himself appears, dragging his great knife with him. He appears again later in the same sequence, when Rose and the policewoman Sybil are locked inside a room with no way out but through the door. The very same door that Pyramid Head is standing behind. He tries to get them with the help of his knife, but suddenly he withdraws his pursuit. The darkness lifts, and Rose and Sybil are safe, for now. Pyramid Head only appears once more in this film, outside the church. This is probably the most infamous scene, and I've been told by Supervisor Ray that I absolutely cannot show it unfiltered here on YouTube. But if you're curious, I'm sure you can find it. Dahlia appears to summon Pyramid Head to punish Anna, who she's just had a verbal spat with. Pyramid Head wastes no time in showing us how brutal he can be. Perhaps the execution is metaphorical, as she is laid bare to her sins, and Pyramid Head shows us all that we're made of the same bones, muscles, organs. Maybe we're not so different underneath it all. We don't see him again in this film, but he does return for the sequel. Before we move on, did you know that the visual aesthetic for the normal world version of Silent Hill in this movie was partially inspired by a real-life town called Centralia in Pennsylvania? Yes, the movies, not the games. It is a near ghost town after a coal mine fire started burning underground in 1962 and is still burning to this day. Most residents abandoned the town, and all the empty houses and buildings left were claimed under eminent domain and mostly demolished, along with the zip code being discontinued by the postal service. As of 2020, only 5 people still live there, with the coal fire burning underneath them. Experts say it may take another 250 years before the fire burns out. Now, back to our featured presentation. The sequel film, Silent Hill Revelation, was released in 2012 and was written and directed by mjbasset. Even more loosely based on a game, this time the third one. Pyramid Head is back, and once more played by Roberto Campanella. The film opens in a nightmare sequence, and they waste no time in showing the monster of the hour. Chained up with hooks in his back, Pyramid Head is seen controlling a carousel by cranking hand pedals. Heather wakes from a nightmare, and later she must go to Silent Hill to rescue her father. On the trip to Silent Hill, she's reading her father's notes about the spooky town, and there's a drawing of Pyramid Head, with a note that he is the guardian of Alyssa. Spoiler alert, Heather is the girl Sharon from the first movie, but now a teenager. And as we know from the first movie, also spoiler alert, Sharon is Alyssa, kind of. So guess who's getting a cool new bodyguard? Pyramid Head appears again in the asylum scene, when several inmates try and attack Heather. He slices the arms off the inmates, but while Heather hides for safety, there appears to be no intention of harming them. Towards the end of the film, he's seen operating the carousel again, like in the nightmare sequence. The carousel descends underground, where Heather has her final showdown with the main human antagonist, Claudia. Claudia transforms into the missionary, but before she can attack Heather, Pyramid Head comes to her rescue, and the main boss fight ensues. Pyramid Head wins, and Heather is saved. There's a very brief random post-credit scene showing Pyramid Head dragging his great knife, perhaps in search of more tortured souls to judge. Now, video game movie adaptations are a contentious subject, perhaps equally as contentious as fan opinions of the great Pyramid Head himself. And this isn't a film review channel, but this is my video, so I'm going to let you know my opinion. The first film is pretty decent. It has great cinematography and atmosphere. It seems to lift some shots directly from the games, with weird fixed angles and perspectives that create an unsettling vibe. There are several wide shots showing just how empty and isolated the foggy town can be, although in the movie it's smoke, not fog. In contrast, the otherworld scenes are all up in your face and there is nowhere to run. It's clear to see the director of this film loved the source material and tried to bring that to the big screen. The film's score is arranged by Jeff Danner, using original game music from the first 4 games, originally composed by Akirayamaoka. Also of note is the majority of the monsters and location are practical, with additional effects to enhance them with CGI. It gives the movie a particular feel, and saves it from a lot of the dating that CGI-heavy movies of the time suffered from today. If you stand back and enjoy it as an inspired by piece of media, I could easily agree this version of Silent Hill exists in some kind of parallel reality to the game reality, but is just as valid. The second movie, well, not so good, but it has its moments. It drops most of the game soundtrack, instead opting for a more Hollywood horror movie score, complete with jump scare sounds. Long gone are the wide, isolated shots and unsettling fixed camera angles. The sequel is very much a horror movie of the era, leaning heavily into gore and gross out moments for shock. It's predominantly set in the Otherworld version of Silent Hill, and as for the plot, well, it's like watching it on fast forward. There's plenty of references to the game, don't get me wrong, but the first film is superior in every way. Oh, did I mention the sequel was also made for 3D? That aspect of the film really weakens it for me, and as more time passes, I think the sequel will age faster than its predecessor. So Pyramid Head's appearances in 2 movies, of which neither were based on a game he debuted in, is certainly questionable, kinda. Remember, in Silent Hill 2, Pyramid Head is James's guilt made real, and in Homecoming, Bogeyman is the symbol of punishment too, something all the characters knew they deserved. Well, in the movieverse, Pyramid Head could still arguably represent a similar ethos. In the first film, Rose feels guilty that she disobeyed her husband's wishes and brought their daughter back to Silent Hill, where she subsequently lost her. Pyramid Head also kills Anna for disobeying the rules and exploring the Devil's Playground alone. In the sequel film, he is simply Alyssa's guardian, as explained in the notebook, but you could argue he protects Alyssa because it's the same as punishing those who would harm a child. I don't know. Even if you hate the fact that Pyramid Head exists outside of James's mind, I still think this idea is food for thought. Also, the second movie, it's the lowest rated Silent Hill piece of media so far. But something I thought was pretty good in the sequel movie was Pyramid Head controlling the carousel. I know it looks a little weird and goofy, but hear me out. Rain of Brass Petals 3 Voices edit was track 26 on the Silent Hill 3 soundtrack, released back in 2003. Within the first stanza it says, "I spin the carousel." It has been suggested that the 3 stanzas of the song relate to 3 of the most prominent creatures in Silent Hill from the first 3 games, being Pyramid Head, Valtial, and God. It is also speculated that the whole song is about the 3 aspects of Pyramid Head himself, which I think is pretty cool. I do like that the movie makes this little visual nod to the official song released years earlier, and even had the track in the credits. You should check it out, and all of the Silent Hill music, to be honest. Anyway, before we get into the alternate reality, how do you think Pyramid Head connects with the Caped Crusader, Moon Knight? Have you heard of the Executioner painting in the Silent Hill Hotel? Do you know its terrible history? Many years ago, there was a children's author who was struggling to get their work published. They had an inquisitive eye that captured a world that only the very young or the very old could see. But with no publicist to get their work seen by the right people, the artist was struggling just to survive. They decided that the best thing to do would be to go travelling the backwaters of America to find inspiration for their last-ditch attempt to make it work before they gave up on their dreams. Well, it's said that the artist found inspiration in the most unlikely place, Shepherd's Glen. They met a woman with dark eyes that just seemed to intoxicate the artist. Drunk on lust, they embodied the beast with 2 backs, but in the morning she was gone, as if she had never been at all. The artist, smitten with the dark-eyed woman, wandered the town asking anyone they met if they'd seen this woman, this absent fairy of theirs, and if they knew her name, and yet, like Whore rolling in from the sea, it was like she'd never been there at all. Unable to forget her, the artist decided to drown their sorrows and see if they could find the answer at the bottom of a bottle. As last drinks were called, a woman caught the artist's eye. She had a beautifully sculpted image, as if she'd been carved from marble. Her eyes shone as if plucked from a goddess, and the artist knew they must have her. After some sweet words were shared between the pair, the couple headed back to the artist's room and unfurled one another as if they were already well acquainted. Again, the artist woke with the morning light, and again, the midnight lily was gone. This compounded the heartache gifted from the woman with dark eyes. The artist found themselves feeling empty and used, like the cheap glass tumbler devoid of liquid. It wasn't until many weeks later that when visiting another town, the artist found the dark-eyed woman, arms linked with another. The artist watched and followed the pair until they separated, and decided to ask the woman with no name to visit their room that very night. Surprisingly, the woman agreed, although they were betrothed to another. As the artist walked back to their hotel, they came across the porcelain woman. What luck, they thought. But as they spoke, it became clear that the artist had been forgotten by the woman with the eyes of a goddess. And hurt by this, the artist implored the woman to visit him. They wanted to show their latest work, but she mustn't arrive any earlier than the early hours of the next morning, or it wouldn't be complete. The porcelain woman, clearly flattered but embarrassed by this, agreed to visit, and they went their separate ways. As the morning rose in the virgin sky, a cock crowed a bleak warning, and nature scurried away, as if this warning was meant for them. The woman with the lily-white complexion climbed the stairs of the hotel, eager and yet marred with trepidation, unknowing to what she would find beyond the artist's door. With a hollow knock and the answering clack of a lock being freed, the door opened, and she was ushered in by a familiar face. The artist was looking dishevelled, with messy hair and apron covered in paint, but it was the wild look in their eyes that made her stomach lurch and turn to ice. But without time to think, her delicate wrist was tugged stiffly, and her with it, further into the dimly lit room. The door snapped shut, and that is when the lily met the cold, dark eyes of the artist's first muse, the absinthe fairy with glassy eyes. It wasn't until it was too late that she realised that the paint on the artist's apron had been that particular shade of red. It was unfortunate, but anything she felt after didn't last long, just like her memory of the artist themselves. It is rumoured that the artist never left their hotel room after that. All the supplies they would ever need could be found in that room, and the curtains were never opened. There are people who swear that the artist painted many canvases before they were finally found, but this is hard to prove, as the artist never signed their work. Well, except for one. It was weeks before anyone realised what had happened to the trio. A look of intense horror was found frozen in a rictus grin when the police finally discovered the artist's twisted corpse. Whatever they had seen in their sleep-deprived and drunken state, no one knows. But what they do know is that when the police finally beat down the door, the paint on the canvas known as the executioner was still wet. Well, that was fun. I feel like I've exercised a personal demon today. Going back through all the old video games and digging up some of the random media and fan theories, it's been very cathartic for me. Thank you for coming along for the ride. It gets so lonely here sometimes. Sometimes I can hear the scrape of the great knife, ricocheting around the empty corridors of the factory. Gibbering fans chatter wordlessly to themselves. The toxic paint I ingest may be why I get the sense of vertigo from time to time. Please subscribe to join me on further dives into the deep. It's just nice to know I'm not all alone.
Hey, what about me?
And so, with all that said, thank you for your time. I wish you a good day, and many more besides. Yours, forever in horror, 226. So, it was all your work.